Irish Pride Shipping lies due north of Bunker Hill. To get to it, we must cross the Charles River. West of the shipyard, we find the West Everett Estates and other buildings of industry, including a Poseidon Energy turbine. The shipyard today is swarming with all sorts of insects. When we arrive, we'll have a whole lot of blood bugs to kill. Outside the main structure, we find two tiny little shacks. One is more or less empty, with only a red toolbox inside, and the other is much larger, with a few big industrial machines and one power armor frame. This being a shipyard, we find some ships still moored right outside. Inside one ship, we find a small stash of caps, and there are a few more sunken, resting on the bottom of the Charles, but these are not worth exploring. We don't find anything inside. Now, the official Fallout 4 strategy guide says that the Irish Pride Shipyard produces mid-sized shipping vessels. I wonder what the guide means by mid-sized. Many of the boats we've seen outside have been pretty small, tiny little yachts. There's a catwalk on the western side of the shipyard leading down to the water, and here we find the corpse of a raider. He must have been killed by the blood bugs. We've already killed a handful of them since arriving. The shipyard has a big door built into the southern side, from which the newly built ships would sail right into the Charles River. Along the northern side of the building, we find a bunch of parked cars. These must have been the commuter vehicles owned by the employees who worked at this shipyard. We find a picker-up truck, and yes, that is the name of the truck, I'm not just calling it a picker-up truck, a Zip, and a couple of Corvegas. We don't find very many large industrial trucks, but we learn why when we explore the West Everett Estates. If we find the Turnquist family survival shelter bunker, we find a terminal that talks about how the family fortified the West Everett Estates by stealing some of the trucks parked here at the Irish Pride Shipyard, bringing them back to the West Everett Estates, and turning them into a big barricade surrounding the town. In addition to the big trucks, they used a lot of cars to construct this barricade. I think we can presume that in addition to the trucks, they also stole some of the cars that were parked out in the parking lot. At any rate, the shipyard only has a handful of cars left, either meaning that most had been stolen or that the place employed very few people. On the eastern side of the building, we find another small shack, but this just leads us to a master locked door, which goes inside the building. We won't go through here now, instead we'll go through the front door to explore the shipyard. We arrive in a lobby that's well lit from a nearby window. The sunlight is just streaming into this room. We find a lot of human bones on the ground. Leg bones, arm bones, and we even find human hand bones lying on the desk. This is strange. We typically don't find scattered human bones all over pre-war places like this. Instead, we usually find them as intact skeletons. Checking the nearby supply closet, we find more. There's a pelvis in the corner, a leg bone on the floor, and even left hand bones sitting on a nearby shelf. Leaving the lobby and heading down a hallway, there's a room immediately to our right. On a shelf in this room, we find more human bones. Hand bones, a foot bone, and a big old pot of iguana bits. After my recent video on the topic, I think I'll leave these here. There is a terminal here, but it's completely destroyed, so we sadly don't get very much information about the pre-war history of this place. At the end of the hallway is a bathroom. Inside the bathroom is another closet. Hiding behind the closet door is an entire human ribcage and spine. I wonder how many human skeletons we'll find in pieces scattered between these rooms. So far, we must have at least found 2 whole people. After looting some chems from the first aid kit, we can unlock a novice locked door. This leads us to the employee kitchen, where we find some Mirelurk hatchlings.
Hey, who's first?
On the table in the kitchen is a Nuka-Cola Quantum, and on the wall are a whole bunch of animal paintings. 4 cats and a moose. These shipyard workers must have loved their cute and cuddly pets. Unless someone else, maybe someone who moved in after them, placed these pictures here. Going north down the hallway, we find a men's restroom to the right, chems and a first aid kit, and half of a Mirelurk egg inside the toilet. Looks like someone was trying to flush this Mirelurk egg down the toilet. We find a plunger in here too. Peering through a hole in the roof, we see that this hallway is inside a much larger structure. Instead of going out this door at the end, let's turn around and go back to explore this locker room to the south. In here we find more Mirelurk hatchlings and a number of containers, a metal box, a suitcase, all with randomized loot. There's some buff out in one of the lockers, and more human bones. a rib cage, spine, and pelvis, and both hand bones. Not to mention a leg bone on the floor. Heading out the door in the locker room, we arrive to the shipyard portion of this building. There's a giant crane on the concrete floor next to us, and a boat that the shipbuilders were putting their finishing touches on the day the bombs dropped. This ship is much larger than the ones we found moored in the water outside, and it looks much more like a medium-sized vessel that the official strategy guide talked about. As we explore, we hear a curious voice over a loudspeaker PA system.
When Rory yells at you, it's because Rory loves you. Grow up gentle and giant, sweet Murkies. Claws are for hugging, not pinching. Only meanies eat meat, my little Murkies. Mean Murkies just need to find their happy place. Murky see, murky do, so be nice. Always remember, Rory loves his little Murkies. Stealing food from Rory is very naughty. A calm Murky is a happy Murky. Remember, Rory's legs are not for pinching.
In addition to the living and working area that we went through to get to the shipyard portion, there are two other pods here where we find workbenches and a lot of storage containers. In one of them, we find a whole lot of Mirelurk hatchlings. So who is the voice on the PA system? And who is Rory? I get the impression that the man is speaking in the third person. I think he must be Rory. If you have a jetpack, you can use it to hop up on top of one of the pods, and on the roof we find a skeleton with a duffel bag filled with randomized loot. This may be one of the Irish Pride shipping employees who was trying to loot the place and get out after the bombs dropped, but then finally succumbed to radiation before he could escape. Near his body is also a stash of caps. And if you don't have a jetpack, you can get here by using the nearby pipe. The pipe connects all of these little pods, and you can access the pipe by using a staircase that leads up on top of one of the buildings. Following the pipe all the way to the other pod, here we just find a sleeping bag with a bunch of bottles of vodka. As we come around to the other side of the dry dock, a legendary Mirelurk Killclaw comes up the stairs and attacks. Well, despite the urgings from the voice on the PA system, looks like these Mirelurks are still angry. Continuing along, we find a master-locked door. This was the second entrance door that we saw from the outside. Passing the ramp to the ship, we see some shipping containers blocking our way. Jumping on up, we find an interesting scene going on inside a cart. A full human skeleton is playing checkers with a teddy bear, and it looks like the teddy bear is winning. The teddy bear has collected far more red bottle caps than the skeleton has collected white. On the ground next to the scene, we find another stash of caps and a cooler. And now we can go on to explore the ship itself. Inside the cabin on the main level of this ship, we find two big picnic tables and a locker in the back. Looks like the workers were using this as a makeshift cafeteria while they were building the boat. On one of the tables, we find a magazine. Excellent. Taboo Tattoos. Permanently unlock a new facial tattoo. After looting the magazine, we hear Mirelurk hatchlings above us. Heading outside, we see Mirelurk hatchlings coming down the stairs and attacking. Heading up the steps, we can go to the control room. Here we find a bed, a lantern, and a suitcase. This must have been Rory's bedroom. And on a desk against the wall, we find Rory's terminal. The terminal belonged to Rory Rigwell. Peace, joy, and Mirelurks. Oh gosh. The first one is called Breeding Notes. we learn that Rory was trying to breed a colony of mirelurks from some orphan hatchlings that he found. He is surprised that the mirelurk colony he's raising here has thrived. He thinks that it's due to his positive energy and love. In the next one, Feeding Notes, he complains about how his little Murkies are always so hungry. He has to remember to throw the food far away from himself when feeding them. He says that they almost pinched him again the other day, but he's sure they just don't know what they're doing. The poor things. So Rory feeds the mirelurks that he's raising, but what does he feed them with? Could it possibly be related to all of those human bones we've found so neatly organized on shelves and placed out on display? Could Rory have been feeding these mirelurks human meat? I'm not sure the bones are enough evidence. After all, it seems a little bit against his personality. He's such a optimistic and joyful kind of guy. Doesn't seem quite like the kind of guy that would chop up cadavers and store their body parts for later feedings. But it does raise the question, exactly what did he feed these mirelurks with? In the next one, Security Notes, he says that he's decided to keep a trunk of valuables in the mirelurk nest under the ship for safekeeping. Yeah, that's smart. But he says, I have to be more careful. Some bad people snuck in the other day, despite his warnings, and his little Murkies did something dreadful. I'm glad, he says, that none of my pets got hurt, but it was frightening to see them kill so casually. I must work more on their training. Well, this may help explain that raider corpse we found outside. That guy may have died to the blood bugs, but maybe he was part of a larger raiding party that came here to loot the place of valuables. The mirelurks must have killed and then devoured all of the raiders. And it also sounds like this guy is living in a fantasy. He says, it was frightening to see them kill so casually. I must work on their training. Is he really trying to train these mirelurk monsters to not kill people? How can he possibly be surprised when these mirelurks kill people so casually, as he puts it? Yes, he raised them from eggs. Yes, he is the only family they know, but they're not people. They're monsters. And I believe a great deal of harm is done by those who project humanity onto beasts. The final entry is called Announcement System. Only positive messages for my mirelurks. From here we can turn the announcements coming from the loudspeakers on or off. Sounds like this guy Rory was one of those fellows who believed in the power of words, that he could brainwash these mirelurks into being tame and domesticated simply by speaking positive things to them over and over again over the PA system. We've already heard the peaceful, happy things that he's been saying, and I can only wonder whether or not this made the mirelurks even more crazy. But to save our own sanity, we can use this terminal to turn the announcements off.
Grow up gentle and giant.
Now, Rory talked about a chest of valuables that he had hid in the mirelurk nest. After being attacked by that one mirelurk that came up the ramp, we already know where that nest must be. Heading out of the ship and back over to the dry dock, we can turn left and go down a ramp. Almost immediately, we find more human bones. These mirelurks were indeed eating humans, but I suppose we don't know if that's because Rory was feeding people to the mirelurks, or if these are the bones from raiders. Raiders who attacked the shipyard earlier, whom the mirelurks ate, digested, and then deposited their bones here. After getting to the bottom, we trigger 2 mirelurks to jump up and attack. And here we find something rather unique. On the ground next to the ship's hull, and right next to nearly an entire human skeleton, is a larger than normal mirelurk egg. We find mirelurk eggs all over the place, but this is the first one I've seen that's so large. I wonder why this egg could be so huge. And I'd be terrified to see the mirelurk that came from it. Could it be that since this colony came from only a couple of specimens that Rory had saved, then maybe this extra-large egg is due to the effects of inbreeding? Passing by even more human bones peeking out from the mud, we can go to the end of the dry dock where we find 2 more mirelurks and a big clutch of mirelurk eggs.
Oh, just getting warmed up.
We can loot the remaining eggs for some of those amazing Mirelurk omelets, and then turning left, at the very end, we find the body of Rory Rigwell, lying next to his big steamer trunk.
This idiot got what was coming to him.
Unkind, Kate, that was unkind, but I can't say she's wrong. Looks like Rory came down here to loot something from his chest, or to put something in it, and the hungry Mirelurks decided that he was no longer family, but instead that he was food. On his body, we find the Irish Pride key. This should unlock that master lock door we saw earlier, and some bottle caps and ammunition. In the steamer trunk, we find some bottle caps, ammunition, and some randomly generated weapons and armor. Against the wall right next to the steamer trunk is a big splattering of blood, covering both the cement wall and the seaweed on the wall. I think this tells us that Rory died on top of his steamer trunk. He came down here to place something in it, and then a Mirelurk crushed him against the wall. His body then fell and slipped down this mud to the water below. Heading south to the other end of the dry dock, we find another nest of Mirelurk eggs, which spawns more Mirelurk hatchlings to kill, and after looting all the eggs, we can wind our way back up the catwalk and to that master lock door to let ourselves out. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full story of the Irish Pride Shipyard in Fallout 4. Do you sympathize with Rory? Do you think his world philosophy about positive energy, unbridled optimism, and the power of happy words is noble? Do you think it's practical and realistic? Or do you think that he was a fool? Do you at least admire him for trying to find some bit of happiness in this wasteland? Or do you think he should have focused less on the care of these Mirelurks and more on his own survival? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for my future videos. I publish a new video 6 days a week on a wide range of Fallout topics. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss my next video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a t-shirt shop, folks. If you would like to find an Oxhorn or a Fallout themed shirt, you can find a link to my shop in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers get access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.
Ammo, caps, whatever you find, don't forget to share.